So much for dropping in. Hello, I am Deb Coviello, the Drop-In CEO, and as always, I welcome you always to this podcast because week after week I get to speak to the most amazing leaders who share their insights and experiences with you. And just know from the bottom of my heart, I do this podcast because I want to provide amazing resources for C-suite leaders to help them navigate challenges with confidence. And today I have the good fortune to introduce to you Noel Massie, who has had a distinguished career spanning decades at UPS, and he has served as Vice President of U.S. Delivery Operations, guiding the backbone of package delivery and logistics across the nation. And beyond his executive leadership, he has been a president of three separate business units, an operations division manager, and a corporate schools coordinator. His expertise isn't just theoretical, it's forged in the real world challenges of scaling and optimizing complex operations. Now, his extent of his experience and involvement is very deep in the community. And I'm not going to give away all his work there because we're going to go deep into that into our conversation. But if that wasn't enough, he is also the author of a book called Terms and Conditions. I can't wait to talk more about that. Noel, it is my pleasure to welcome you onto the show.
Well, Deb, I'm really pleased to be here with you and your audience today. And, I look forward to our conversation around leadership over the next half an hour or so.
And it is my pleasure again. I love when I get introduced to these amazing leaders. And from my background, to my listeners, I have a strong background in operations and quality and gosh, by golly, logistics, supply chain management, all of that. I have worked closely with these amazing leaders, but I would love to learn more from his background and his contribution to both his community as well as others. So, Noel, I am going to pass it back to you to share a bit about yourself personally and this amazing career that you've had.
Yeah, thanks for that, Deb. I'll tell you, I'll start with when I came into my career at UPS. I had actually been a lab tech for IBM for a year. My education was electrical engineering, and I went to San Jose State University. And the one thing that UPS offered me that IBM did not was a part-time position where I could actually work and study simultaneously to get my engineering degree. And so I was born and raised in the San Francisco Bay Area. Oakland, California is where I'm from. Home of the Raiders used to be, home of the A's used to be, but that's where I was born and raised. And I went to San Jose State. But in any event, as I was graduating from college, UPS approached me because I'd given notice, and I was in a part-time supervisory position at that time, and said, "Hey, we really love you to stay," and I've never looked back. It was a great career, and I loved what I did. I would say to people in conference talks or wherever I would go, and I'd get asked a question. I go, I had tough days, hard days, and long days, but let me tell you, the day I never had in my career was a bad day. I never had a day I didn't want to show up. And that's really an important part of the story around my journey is that I worked for an organization that was highly ethical and highly driven to the point of value-based leadership. And the bottom line to that is I saw it work. But in any event, I got promoted to what at the time the company was privately owned from 1907 to 97. And I got promoted in 1980 and I became a partner in the company. And that just meant that a percentage of my compensation was in company held shares. And we didn't go public until the late 90s. So we were privately held for over 90 years. And the founder of the organization, James E. Casey, was an amazing individual. He was in Seattle, Washington at the age of 19. He founded a bicycle messenger service. And because he was a principled and value-based leader, I'll tell you that's the reason there's 500,000 individuals in that organization globally today. So I became a supervisor in 1980. In 84, I became a manager. I was only 26 and I had 500 employees under me. And in 1988, I became a division manager where I had six managers with that size contingent under them. And then I went to Philadelphia in the mid 90s and became the COO in Pennsylvania, or Eastern Pennsylvania, that is, in South Jersey. And then in 97, I was promoted to a president's level position. And my first business unit was Chicago, Eastern Illinois, Northern Indiana, Chicago being the anchor. And I was a president in the Chicago business unit, Virginia as well. And then the organization asked my family, my wife, and my two sons, we would go back to California, but we went to Southern California. So people don't know the Northerners and the Southerners in California is Hatfield McCoys, okay? So we definitely live different kinds of lives between Southern California and Northern California, right? So we went to Southern California and we loved it. Candidly, we were there for quite a while, almost a decade, until when I was looking at chapter 2 of my career, the CEO of the organization at the time and COO, Dave Abney and Myron Gray, asked if I would delay that decision and take over U.S. Delivery operations, which I did. And so I had the responsibility for customer relationships at the national level as a support person, as well as the responsibility to help guide the 17 business units in the U.S. on the supply chain side. And that was all encompassing. I was also responsible for our technology R&D tests in the field when we were testing drones and autonomous vehicles, you name it. Those groups worked directly with me because it was my operation. And so it was a great experience. I loved it. But the book I wrote is based on terms and conditions. But the title of the book is Congrats, You've Been Promoted. That's the title of the book. Congrats, You've Been Promoted. And I'll put a copy up so that people can see if they can watch. But that's the title of the book. And I've been ideating this for about 10 years before I actually retired. And the reason for that is the amount of baby boomers leaving the organization had amplified greatly, right? I mean, I'm an example of that. When I left the organization, they created 9 promotions, right? And so I was having a challenge, as well as the other presidents in the U.S., with turnover, okay, of people leaving, highly skilled people leaving the organization, and we were promoting faster than we had in decades. And derailment for a newly promoted leader happens early, within the first couple years. And so the content, when you look at books today, and I've read hundreds, as a matter of fact, I use them regularly with my business unit teams. I'd find a book on leadership I liked, and that'd be our book for the year, and we would read it together. And that was, and I'll talk about that later. But the point is there's not a lot of books out there for the frontline person in the trenches. Most of the stuff that's written today is for people that want to be CEOs, you know, the next Steve Jobs, the next Elon Musk, you know, that kind of stuff. But my book is really about being in the trenches and having an intentional approach, and that's a key word, intentional approach to the leadership environment you are responsible for, right? The terms and conditions of leadership is what it's about.
That's amazing. And I have so many questions to ask you, but congratulations on such an amazing career. Now, while you are quite accomplished, I also sense that you're also humble. But you continue to ascend to higher and higher and higher and higher positions. And by the way, can you stay on another X number of years? What what have others said about you as a leader for which the outcome was that you continue to gain more and more responsibility and have more people in your care? Tell me more about you as a leader.
Well, I am a very specifically development focused leader. I believe leadership has a responsibility to develop the team, to develop the people, right?
Mm.
You can't tell someone how to think. You can suggest it, but at the end of the day, they're going to make the decision on what they think, period, right? Leadership is the ability to influence the behavior of a team or a group of people without coercion. It's simple. The minute you start using coercion, you just left the leadership room. Leadership is influence. It's the ability to develop influence. And in order to do that, and you look at coaches in sports, it's the same thing. They have to influence a group of players to play a certain way, right? Let alone, you know, they get the players because they're already highly skilled anyway. And I think in business, you know, I had a staff of 40, and there was a CFO and a director of engineering and a director of HR. And, you know, and my role with that team wasn't to just sit in meetings and listen to strategy. My real role with that team was to develop them, right? And so when I would drive to work daily, I'd have a name that I'd written down of some leader that we were just going to have a conversation about whatever it is they wanted to discuss developmentally, not how they were hitting
Yeah.
metrics or not, but developmentally. Who were they going to develop today? Who were they going to invest in today? Because another really important point I want to make to your listeners is this. One of the most profound quotes I heard in my career from the founder of the organization in his literature he left for the senior leadership was, you can't hope to get more than you give. Now, this is a person who built a company with 500,000 people in it. And one of his most primary focus areas beyond values, they were first. Integrity, ethics, those were first. Was you can't hope to get more than you give, but people do. People do. So if you want a team to perform well, you have to be able to answer this test. What did you invest in them? How did you help them get better at listening? How did you help them get better at whatever it is you want them to get better at? How did you do that? And do you have an answer to that? And the answer can't be nothing, right? And if you have
Yeah.
a senior leadership team, giving them a half an hour of you every day by plan, by schedule, to just have a discussion. This is your half hour. Okay. What were you trying to get better at this month? And I'm not talking about your metrics. I'm talking about personally. Who are you trying to develop? Those are the things that when they're done, things just get better with the way people behave and the values around that you start to see.
And you're singing to my heart here because one of the things that I learned early on, it's a little bit in my book, The CEO's Compass, is when we spend time with our people, either individually or as a team. So often, when we have either our performance reviews or our one on ones, it's either about the strategy and where you are at on that initiative, or where we at on those results and what are you going to do to close those gaps. I have found that when we have our conversations, start with the most important thing of the developmental opportunities, because I find you bring in, to your point, talented people in the organization. They can do anything, but what is it that we can do to unleash their potential? Maybe they have difficulty confronting difficult situations. When we focus on their development and their improvement, we unleash all the potential, and we may not be talking about why aren't you getting those results. That's the key point. We need to change our leaders is focus on the development, focus on people potential, unleash their all that potential. They're going to return the results. And to your point, you won't get more than you invest in them, but the more you invest, they're going to take care of you and you're going to get peace of mind.
Yeah, not to make that copybook for a moment, I'll give a metaphor. I'm a big metaphor person. I use metaphors for everything. And the reason I use metaphors, and it's actually a chapter in the book, is because it takes the person out of the moment and it works. So if you go to a bank and say, I'd like to make a withdrawal, and they'll go, sure. Deb, how much you want? How much you got in here? You go, nothing. They're going to laugh. Okay. They're going to be, if you didn't invest, you get no return. And people understand that when it comes to money, right? If you want to make more money, then you got to invest in order to grow your wealth and blah, blah, blah. It's the same thing with humans. Okay. If you want them to perform at a high level, you need to spend time developing their skills. What skills are they deficient in? And can you and them come to an agreement? And is it congruent? And then how can you help them get better at it? It's not complicated. You know, I met a lot of managers, senior level managers, that presidents actually, that we spend $500,000 moving someone from Boston to Seattle. When you talk about home relocations and all this kind of stuff, and because if they had lost money on their house, we'd make it up and all this kind of stuff, and put them with a president, and there might be a director HR or whatever, and then that president would 6 months later go, well, this person's not doing well. I don't really think it was a good fit, blah blah blah. And I go, whoa, 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 time out, time out. Hit the pause button, okay?
Yeah.
Write down what you have invested in them. Show me what they're not good at. Write it down. Tell me what you think they're not good at. And they write it down. Okay, now tell me how you invested in them to make any of that better, right? Because I'm going to go meet with that person and ask them to do the same thing. Tell me what your boss has worked on you with to get better at. What did your boss say you need to do better? That's not about an annual evaluation. Okay. That's just not. It's not about a bi-yearly evaluation. I mean, your role is like Nick Saban's role, coach the team. Okay. Nick Saban didn't, in the middle of a football game, go in the locker room and eat a sandwich. Okay. When the game was on, he was engaged with the players and the assistant coaches. He coached nonstop all the time. Bill Belichick, all the time. Pat Riley, all the time. Life is the same. In business, it's no different. And so, executives who are ivory tower and sit in their offices, okay, if they're not giving in that way, then they shouldn't expect to get in that way. And you see it all the time with organizations that, they ascend very quickly because it was a thought and an idea and it was great, you
Hmm.
know, and then derailment happened. And a lot of times, it's at the top, the CEO,
Yeah.
because culture, and I'll land the plane with this comment on this topic. Culture is built at the top. It absolutely is. It's executed at the bottom. That's where it's executed. Okay. At the person that's getting those trucks unloaded for you on that dock with 30
Oh God. Yeah,
employees.
I know.
Okay. That's who's the flesh and bone of the organization. That's where things happen. That's where results and excellence occur. That's where customer satisfaction is. And I would always start my day, not in the office. I went there when I had to, but it wasn't by preference. I'd be on the floor. I'd go on the floor and I talk to employees, and I would really talk to the management team on the floor, the manager and the supervisors who were leading, unloading that dock or handling the brick and mortar of the organization.
Hmm.
That's where I would spend my time, because what it told me, and I never dive bomb, my senior leaders. What it told me is what the development needs looked like in that space.
Mm. I'm going to sidestep this podcast just a little bit right now. You're an eloquent speaker, and obviously, you're showing up on podcasts to be able to reach more people, share your insights via your book. But how much speaking have you done or are you planning on doing? Because you're an eloquent speaker.
Well, I've spoken. I had a career where I had to represent the organization, and
Uh-huh.
of course, we did some training in that regard with talking to large audiences and those kind of things, but not a whole lot. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
to be
Mm-hmm.
candid, but the best piece of advice I was ever given, I
Uh-huh.
was 19, and when I worked at IBM, I supported a group of 13 engineers, and ironically, in the late 70s, there was no Silicon Valley, right? IBM was the
Mm-hmm.
Microsoft Apple of the day. And I worked in a unit where I worked with a Russian engineer from Russia who had come to the U.S. and IBM had brought him over, and he had this heavy Russian accent. But it was commonly known that he was the smartest person in the room.
Okay.
Everyone knew that he had developed 37 patents for the organization. His name was Manfred Dreblow, and I talk about Manfred in my book, actually, in the communication portion of the book. I talk about the importance of it as a new leader,
Mm-hmm.
the importance of knowing that what you say to people needs to be said in a professional, directional way, right? But I talk about Manfred. Manfred was the smartest person in the room, and he was gruff, classic. He was a really gruff, kind of guy. And I'm 19, working with three other, lab tech interns, if you will. And I'm walking into work one day, and Manfred looks at me, lowers his glasses. Hey, kid, come here. And I go in his office. I'm like intimidated like crazy. And he sits down. He'd been working with me for a few months, and he goes, so tell me, kid, what is it that you want to be? I mean, why are you here? Why are you going to be an engineer? And we had this long conversation. And he said, well, I'll just tell you, and everyone knew that Manfred had enough education, true story, to have had two PhDs, and he wouldn't get them. Okay. Because he was protesting the promotion process. That was his way of doing it. Right. So he says, what's your major? I mean, he says, what's your minor? Excuse me. And I said, well, it's physics. He says, so you electrical engineering, minor in physics. He goes, let me help you with something. I didn't ascend in IBM because of my language and my inability to communicate. He says the accent. Yeah, he says I minimized it through my career, et cetera, et cetera. He says he says the people who run this organization are the best presenters and the best speakers. That's what he said to me. I was 19. He said, if you want success in your career, you need to put emphasis on communications. I went
Bingo.
back to school, I'm not
Yeah.
kidding, and I changed my minor to speech communications.
Mm.
So I didn't have two science majors. I had a science major and a liberal arts minor in speech communications. That was an absolute pivot in my life when Manfred said that to me. Because then I spent 2 years in classes on journalism, speech communication. Those were the kinds of things that
Yeah.
encompassed.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, I have found so many brilliant people because they have not had the opportunity to learn how to message, learn how to influence, know how to make an impact. Whereas highly technical people are trained to present information, to present data,
Yes,
trends, and insights. But that alone, unless we know how to connect with people and their mindset in a language that they can understand, all that technical gift is lost. So
yes.
again, message for anybody out there. If you got really talented people, spend time working with them on how they message, communicate up, communicate sideways. It is going to be the key to unleashing their gift and their
And that's a,
competency.
a real
Yeah.
benefit to the
Yeah.
organizations that may be listening today when you emphasize, and actually it's not as complicated as going to Toastmasters and all these kind of things. It just really isn't. But it is important that they have a basic understanding of how people receive information, how
Mm,
retention rates happen when speaking. And so one of the things I talk about in the book under directional communication, that's actually the chapter.
okay.
Directional communication is how to deliver a quick 3 to 5 minute message daily with your team, right?
Yeah.
Because every supervisor, every manager has to meet with their team in the morning. That's how it works, right? And you're giving them the day's agenda or whatever it is the organization wants you to communicate. But the point I make in the book is that, companies like UPS that assign a 3 minute mandatory 3 minute communication every day, that's 1.5 million minutes. That's 1.5 million minutes. Walmart is 3 million minutes. Okay. So convert that into wages. So every day they're making this massive investment so that people hear stuff. Okay. In a short burst. And it could be training, it could be compliance, it could be whatever, right? And so in the book, I teach the young leader and hopefully their manager, because congruence matters. The manager should read the book first. I just got a great message from a couple of managers, and I've got a couple of great messages from a couple of managers who read this book that were just so appreciative of the content in the tactical side, which is part two of the book. Because part two of the book is the how-to part of the book. This book is not about just the importance of ethics, values, fairness, and those kind of things. I mean, those are really important. But in the second part of the book is tactical. There's an exercise. Here's how you do it. Go practice with your family, with your friends. And in the exercise on directional communications, it's real simple. They have to start with an attention getter, get everyone's attention. People are looking at their phones, tired around.
Yeah.
Recognize someone's accomplishment as the first opening thing out of your mouth. Hey, group, today I want to recognize Deb. And then people look, right? That's the attention getter. Then after you do that, tell them what you're going to tell them. We're going to talk about proper work boots today, right? Then tell them. And then you talk about why it's important to have proper work boots, safety, slipping, whatever. And then tell them what you told them. In summary, we talked about safe work boots. It's really directional, but it's very professional and it gets respect of that team for that person. And I emphasize that as a young leader, when I was a young leader, right, we were taught that skill set. It mattered. And when I gave a talk to 40 drivers and I started off doing that, when I began to talk, they were looking at me, right? They were looking
Mhm.
directly at me because today we're going to recognize John for X,
Yeah.
Y, or Z. Or today, hey, everyone, it's Joe's birthday or Mary's birthday. Let's give them a hand, right? Or whatever, right? Get their attention. So in the book, the second part of the book is tactical, right? How to train a new employee, 7 steps of effective training, right? That's what's in the book. It's tactical in the second part.
So I know we talked about the reason for the book is because there's going to be so many people retiring and have been retiring, for which
Yes.
then the newer population of professionals are being promoted at a rapid rate. So, yeah, of course, they need training, but what was the impetus for writing this? Because I think you said it was several years coming. Was there a
Yes.
defining moment that says, I got to write something, or you know what? I got to leave my legacy. So, what was the reason you finally said, I got to put this content out there into the world?
Because I knew it was necessary. Because in my own world, we were cutting
Yeah,
training budgets left and right, right? So most corporations were going through that. The echoes, what people don't, I retired in 2019, but the echoes of financial crisis last more than a moment in companies.
right,
And it certainly did in the supply chain industry, retail industry, et cetera. I would visit as a president of a business unit, a substantial component of my responsibility was customer interface, right? I'm the president. I go see the company that's shipping whatever, widgets. And I would meet with Deb, the business owner, and say, so
mm,
how are we doing for you? Inevitably, that conversation would migrate to many other topics, and people and development would always be one of them. Well, when
mm,
2007 hit, the echo from that lasted really well into the mid 2010s, right? 2015, 2014. So, but the response companies have to financial crisis is they start getting rid of what they consider to be discretionary costs. Okay. Travel gets cut. We're not going to do that anymore. We're going to, do conference calls at the time. There was no Zoom. And so training budgets are always a casualty. And I was no
mm,
different. So training budgets where you might send people to seminars or whatever you want. We were spending 12, $13 million a year on development training, on supervisor schools and manager schools and blah, blah, blah. Because we
right.
had Teamsters, right? 200,000 plus Teamsters. And the one thing you don't get to do with a Teamster employee is tell them they're fired on the spot. Doesn't happen. Well, you may do it, but there's going to be a panel. There's going to be a review. A lot of moving parts to that. So we spent a lot of time teaching people how to be great leaders and handle things in a moment, right? And I think we were very successful at that. But in any event, as we cut all those budgets, that's when the motivation for writing a book hit my head, and then I began taking notes through the latter part of my career on what I wanted it to be. And because I had been exposed to curriculum and content development in the organization, and I had been chairman of a lot of boards at that point externally, like the LA Chamber of Commerce. I was board chair. So I had access to other presidents and general managers as board chair of the LA Chamber of Commerce
Wow.
in 2014. And we all had the same things going on, right? We all had turnover of new people, turnover of supervisors, a lot of development needs. So the idea came then, and then I just
Okay.
kept notes. I just kept notes, and it only amplified as time went on. And so that was the idea for the book. It was really from my peer group,
Hmm,
Candy,
hmm.
and then my own experiences in my organization.
So, to my audience, again, the name of Noel's book is Congrats, You Have Been Promoted. I would highly recommend that you take a look. It's just came out in June. It sounds like not only is it somebody for the new leader, but also the mid career leader, perhaps even the one that is more senior in your role. Because if your people are not prepared for their leadership roles, this may be a book that you want to read. But I want to shift gears a little bit because Noel is just such a person with a lot of dimensions. And you had started touching upon the fact that you are quite involved in the community and have also served on many boards. I would love for you to share a few of those positions and the impact that those organizations make and what you have done as well and why you care about them so much. Because, again, you're not just work, you're not just UPS, you're not just the author of an amazing book, but also a community leader.
Well, it's kind of simple. I didn't mention, my wife, Amanda, of 35 years, and my two sons, Pierce and Braden, but early in their lives, my two sons, one's 32, he's a doctor today. The other's 30, he's a behavioral therapist for autistic kids. They both went to college pre-med and made those career choices, and they're both doing very well. But more than that, they're of high character and they're really good men. And candidly, and actually, I'm extremely proud of that part of them more than the professions they're in. But when they were young, and I'd like your audience to hear this. I worked for an organization, before I get to that finally, that was highly focused on community service from the time I was an early supervisor. It was And it wasn't this pressure point and requirement, but there were always things for us to do. Go paint a school, go work and clean up a park, go do community service. And so I credit the organization I work for in creating my ethos around what that is. And you could see us on weekends out there with a bunch of delivery drivers or employees, and we'd be cleaning the school or painting the school or whatever. Right? There's always volunteer work. But I would take my sons. Amanda and I would take our boys with, and you could talk to them today, and the thing they would tell you they had the most memory of is when they did backpacks that we went to a United Way organization, and they were making backpacks for kids that were homeless. And it was only for kids that were living in taxi cabs, abandoned cars, under whatever, right? This problem isn't new to today. But anyway, we would go and they had, backpacks, kid backpacks, and we'd put in food in those backpacks and, bars and protein bars and blah blah blah, and then someone would go out into the community and deliver. But we took our kids to do that. And then the other thing, I got great advice from an individual. And actually I was on a flight once and I was talking to this professor from Rutgers. He happened to be in the seat next to me, ironically, and fortunately I should say. And he said this to me, and it really stuck. He says, Noel, he was asking me about my kids, and at the time they were like 9 and 10 or something. He says, I have two kinds of students in my classroom: those that have been exposed internationally on service work and those who have not. And so our two sons, when they were in their teens, both did mission work tutoring young kids in India, right? And I'll never forget when they went. They were 13 and 14. And they went to India and they were tutoring kids, and they were there for like 3 weeks or something.
Wow.
They got and we picked them up at the airport, and my youngest son got off the plane and he walked out the doors of the airport and he kissed the ground and he inhaled and he went, American air. Right? I mean, you talk about an appreciation for what others had. They learned that by doing that. And they both did several mission trips later in the Appalachians here in America. And we didn't have to push them to do that. They searched for those opportunities
Mm.
based on that one experience they had in India on a mission trip with our church. It was service work. But
Yeah.
the point being is, as we've always, Amanda and I brought them with on community service.
Hmm.
And so that was how it transmitted to them. I sit on the Annenberg Foundation. It's one of the largest foundations in America. I've been on that foundation since 2014. I'm on the investment committee, help drive the investment decisions through the advisor firms. And I sit on a board called Chapter One, which is one of my most fulfilling organizations. And we focus on second grade literacy, second graders. That's what we look at. Because here's the facts: no matter what a child's socioeconomic level is, they can come from a billionaire's family. Okay, seriously. No, they doesn't matter race or religion. It doesn't matter. When kids can't read at the second grade level, when they're actually in the second grade, so if they enter the third grade and they're not reading at grade level out of the second grade, they drop out of high school at like a 60% rate in some regions, and it's an average of about 40 nationally. And when they can read at the second grade level, when they're in the second grade, their confidence skyrockets and they graduate in the 93 percentile. So that's why we focus on that grade. And we provide grants to classrooms for teacher assistants. Corporate entities provide tutors who do online Zoom,
Wow.
basically tutoring, if you will, from their office for like, one day a week with a second grader for an hour, right? And we have a scripted program. And then I'm on a couple of other boards, community boards, but I've been serving on community boards for over 30 years. And that's what there's a responsibility to do that. Part of a legacy that anyone leaves is really going to come down to what did you give, not what did you get. When the day comes and you're meeting your maker, it's going to be about what did you give, not what did you get. I mean, that's real. I'm not, that's not
That's
trying to
beautiful.
be idealistic. What did you give? You're not going to be laying on that bed the last day going, well, at least I bought a Porsche.
I
I got
know, but
promoted 4 times. I mean, you can do all that, but what did you give? Who did you give to?
and you,
Beyond what was in front of you, and so I believe very firmly in that, and as does my family, my wife, and my 2 boys.
beautiful. And thank you so much for sharing that important part of your life. And ultimately, what we're all here is to impact humanity. It ties in beautifully into investment in people in the workplace. You invest in your people, and you may get, but first and foremost, as a leading indicator, is how much have we invest in our people? Because they're the front line, they are the closest to your customers. That's the way you leave your legacy. Irregardless of whatever results you actually get, the people there are the ones that are going to remember how you made them feel and how did you shine a light on them and lift them up. Amazing conversation, Noel. And I am so grateful that we've had an opportunity to just scrape the surface of your accomplishments, about your family, about your community service. But we need to bring this to a close. And I want to give you an opportunity to share any last thoughts with our audience.
Yeah, the thing I would say, first of all, thank you for that. And the thing I would say is, foundationally, I'd like the audience to think about this, and that is that everyone has terms and conditions to have a relationship. Everyone does, right? And where that came from for me and why it's peppered through the book is I had an experience once where the terms and conditions of a warranty wasn't upheld, wasn't fulfilled, right, with an
Mhm.
organization. And in the conversation I had with the person, they said, "Well, sir, you turn to page 11 and read the bottom, read the fine print." And those are the terms. And I hung the phone up. Okay. Because they had failed to live up to, the warranty that they communicated. But anyway, I translated that into leadership is where that came from me. And as I thought about that and turned it into a leadership principle, I said, well, people have terms and conditions. If I ask people, and I've done this hundreds of times, write down for me 5 things that are non-negotiable with you when it comes to a relationship, whether it's with a company, a human being, what are those 5 things? And it's always the same stuff: respect, dignity, um, listening to me when I have something to say. I mean, they write them down. And the point is when you hire a person, okay, just like you click a box when you buy an app or when you click a
Mhm.
box when you buy an airline ticket, accepting the terms and conditions. When you hire someone, you're clicking their box. You are accepting their terms and conditions, which means if you don't adhere to them, if you treat them poorly, they're going to leave, right? People quit people, not companies. They're going to walk out the door on you. So understand that people have terms and conditions. And intentional leadership around terms and conditions means you don't leave something to chance like integrity. You announce to the team and our organization, we're going to have integrity. We're not gonna ever deceive people. We're gonna always do things the right way. If it's not right, we're not doing it. And we're gonna always be ethical, right? Ethical is the honorable conduct towards others. We know what that
Mm.
looks like. We know what dishonorable conduct looks like. So we're not going to ever engage in things that don't look ethical. I mean, the leader has to intentionally say that stuff and not think that you can imply we're going to have integrity. You have to intentionally say we're going to have integrity. And I did it for years. Just know all day that I never left when there was a fire, a flood, a hurricane, an earthquake, and safety was at risk, and thousands of our people were going into that environment. I led as I was taught to lead by great mentors, that those were the moments that you didn't get to be human. And what do I mean by that? We have human reactions, human emotions. There are moments in leadership where you have to rise above that stuff. You have to rise above your emotions so you don't get to be human in that moment, and especially in natural disasters. So, intentionally saying, here are the terms and conditions of leadership to the team, you know what happens? It becomes their terms and conditions. They go, we're going to have integrity. We're going to be ethical. Okay. We're not going to do things that are outside of policy and procedures. We're not going to be making stuff up. And when the leader is that direct and intentional, it's amazing the impact of influence they can have on their people. And I'd want them to remember that.
Oh, no. Thank you so much. Your insights have been amazing. This has just been an amazing conversation for me. Your leadership just comes through and through. And I just hope everybody out there listening has just absorbed all of these insights. And you have also inspired me, Noel, because it just helps propel me to continue to go forward as I also continue to invest in people, whether it's the CEO of the company or the people in their care. Because when we can lift their confidence, their capability, their ability to serve customers, everything else just comes with. So I just want to wish you well. I want to wish you much success with your new book and continue to speak the good word to those leaders from the bottom to the top and the top down. So thank you so much for being an amazing guest, Noel.
Deb, thanks so much for having me today. I really enjoyed it and appreciate the time.